Hey guys, Valve's new Steam machine has hit the market and the reviews are in, and it costs more than people were expecting, and the performance is not as good as people were expecting. So it's kind of a bummer. I'm going to show you an alternative. I got sent two devices from PELADN, an eGPU, which I didn't even think was relevant in 2026, but the performance with the Mini PC is really pretty impressive, and it costs less. You get more storage, you get better performance, and it's upgradable. And this is the PELADN Link S-3, which is also a Thunderbolt dock. So it's Thunderbolt 5, and you get all these extra ports, plus an NVMe slot for even more storage. And the links are in the video description with a 10% discount code. And here it is. I tested this out with an RX 5700 XT, and then I upped it to an RX 6800 XT. And of course, this is not as portable. You know, you can't just throw this in your bag, but you can throw the Mini PC in your bag for a little portable gaming rig. I mean, this has an eGPU in it. It's not very powerful, but for a quick on the go, you got a little monitor, you want to throw it in your bag, you can do that. This is super lightweight. It has a little magnetic door on it, and you can see it's got upgradeability, so you can put more RAM in this thing, up to 64 gigs and a second NVMe, and it comes with 16 gigs and a 1 terabyte SSD, the model I got, but you can get it cheaper with just 512 and use external storage, whatever you got, right? So we're going to check out the benchmarks against the Steam machine and against my Mac Pro, which has an RX 6900 XT. And I don't have a Steam machine personally, but thanks to Linus Tech Tips, I can borrow his benchmarks. And first up is the good old Shadow of a Tomb Raider. And I gotta say, his settings were kind of weird. Like, he had 25% CAS, which is sort of a resolution scaler. So he scaled it down to only 25% from 4K. So this is not native 4K. This is like using FSR before there was FSR, and it's actually more like the native resolution is 960 by 540, and then it's being upscaled to 4K. So looking at my lovely graph here made by ChatGPT, you can see that LTT Steam machine is getting 126 frames per second, and I locked in the exact same settings, and I am getting 133 frames per second, so not a huge difference there. And then you can see my native straight up 4K, no scaling going on. I'm getting 73 frames per second on the highest preset, albeit without the ray trace shadows turned on. And then just going down the line, these are all native resolution now at 1440p. I'm getting 123 FPS at the highest settings, and 1080p I'm getting 136, which is not a huge leap, but that's because all the work is now being done by the CPU as opposed to the GPU. So at a 4K, it's 100% GPU. At 1440, it's much more mixed, and at 1080, it's really being driven by the CPU. Now we move on to Cyberpunk, and again, Linus Tech Tips settings are a little strange the way they have this set up. Like, they're just not using a straight up preset, so it's hard to gauge whether I'm getting this right. And it seems like they're trying to make the Steam machine seem a little better than it is, because they have it set to Ultra, but as soon as you change FSR to Performance, it no longer calls it Ultra, it calls it Custom. But anyway, here are my results. The PELADN eGPU with the RX 6800 XT and Mini PC are absolutely smoking the Steam machine. And just to prove it to you, here's the actual benchmark window. I ran it a second time, and my settings are the same as Linus, and I'm getting 60.93 frames per second average, with the max frames per second at 76 and the minimum at 51. So I ran Cyberpunk benchmark with my Mac Pro and the PELADN at all these resolutions. It was the high preset FSR 2.1 quality. So it was a straight up preset, and if you want to list your results down below, I'd love to see them, especially if you have the Steam machine. And it'd be great to see somebody just run a regular preset with no changes to see what results you're getting at these 3 different resolutions. And of course the Mac Pro is outperforming the eGPU with the RX 6800 XT because it's got an RX 6900 XT, and if I really wanted to do apples to apples, I could have pulled out the RX 6900 XT and put it in the eGPU, but honestly I just wanted to see the difference between the two. And you know, I thought maybe because the newer CPU in the Mini PC might be able to outperform the older Xeon processors with the slower GPU, but that's not the case. So I ran one more comparison, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, with just the Mac Pro and the Mini PC, and you can see that they are pretty close. And I believe it's because the Mini PC's CPU is faster, so it's making a difference in this game because it's more CPU intensive. And this is native resolutions, no upscaling. So you know, you can buy an old Mac Pro, throw in a nice graphics card, and you're going to be crushing the Steam machine running Windows or Linux without the limitation of the Thunderbolt bus. And here's with a little ray tracing, 1440p, I'm getting 57 frames per second in FSR balanced with no frame gen. And again at 1440p we are using FSR and frame gen, and I've turned on a lot of the ray tracing, and you can see we're getting a very playable frame rate with ray tracing at 1440p. And I think 1440p is the sweet spot for this setup. 4K, you're definitely going to be hammering a GPU, but if you put in a cheaper RX 5700 XT, you're going to have a nice little gaming rig for less money than the Steam machine. And just to throw it in there, here's an RX 5700 XT in the PELADN eGPU, and this is native 1080p. No upscaling, no frame gen, none of that stuff, and I'm getting 86 frames per second with Cyberpunk. And one last benchmark here, we got the RX 5700 XT in the PELADN at 1440p, and we're getting 63 frames per second. So totally usable for 1440p gaming with the eGPU. And the RX 5700 XT worked really well with Tomb Raider, so I was getting 131 frames per second in 1080 and about 83 in 1440, so that is really very good. And you can pick one of those up really cheap. And the world's your oyster as far as what GPU you want to use. But you are limited by the Thunderbolt bandwidth, so you don't want to run out and buy a 5090 to use with this setup. That would not make sense. So to actually get the PELADN whole setup, you're going to come in really close to the price of the Steam machine. But let's face it, folks, these are already going up on eBay for 3 times what the initial cost is, which is just, you know, horrible, and it's just a fact of life of the age that we live in, and it sucks. And here are the specs of both of the units, and one thing that the PELADN has that the Steam machine does not have is an audio output jack. The Steam machine, you have to use HDMI or USB to get audio out of the unit. It does not have an analog audio output jack. And the PELADN is super easy to upgrade. You can just slap in another NVMe, you can slap in more RAM, you don't even need a screwdriver, you just pop the top off. The Steam machine, you have to really take it apart to upgrade it, but at least it is upgradable with the RAM and the single NVMe slot, whereas the PELADN has dual NVMe slots. And where the Mini PC eGPU setup really shines is you can use whatever GPU you want. The Steam machine's GPU is unupgradable, so you're stuck with the GPU you get. You know, it would have been cool if they threw an OcuLink port on this thing, or if they put in Thunderbolt 5, but instead you're stuck with that internal GPU. There's no upgrade path, but it is really designed for your TV like a PlayStation or an Xbox. And I have sort of a higher end setup. You can do this on a much lower budget. You can buy the PELADN S2, which is a simple eGPU dock which connects to a computer using OcuLink, which is the fastest connection you can have with an external GPU. But of course you need a Mini PC with OcuLink. But I have a NAS with OcuLink, so I might pick one of these up. Or maybe PELADN will send me one, wink wink. And of course the Steam machine is super quiet. This setup, not so much. But the PC itself is pretty quiet. So what do you guys think? Would you go for a mini PC and an eGPU? Let me know in the comments. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing a follow-up video on the eGPU, using it with different computers and different LLM models. So stay tuned for that. It's pretty interesting what you can do. In fact, with my Mac Pro, I can use my internal GPU and the external GPU, doubling my amount of VRAM. So that's a pretty cool use case. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next Mac Sound Solutions video.